Greetings, Sentinels. This is Universe Unique, and today the truth comes to light. Enough with lazy comparisons. Mr. Fantastic and Plastic Man don't play the same sport. One bends physics with method, the other ignores physics by sheer will. And that's exactly where everyone gets it wrong. I'll explain the detail no one talks about. Before we dive in, I want to ask you something. We're about to hit an important milestone on the channel, and your subscription right now isn't just a number, it's access. You gain deep analyses, visual guides that unlock Easter eggs almost no one sees, and priority in the upcoming videos that connect the dots between Marvel and DC. If this content is connecting you with the truths of the multiverse, hit that like button and join our secret line of subscribers. And tell me in the comments, which country and city are you watching from? I read them all. Two masters of elasticity, but from opposite worlds. On one side, Reed Richards, the brain who turns any limit into an equation. On the other, Eel O'Brien, a chemical disaster who became a living cartoon. The difference begins at the ontology of power. Reed manipulates his own body as if he were piloting a machine of extreme precision. Every cell is a lever, every molecule has a function. He stretches, compresses, creates impact mass, becomes a barrier, tunnel, net. The result is force applied with logic. When he increases the area of contact, he redistributes energy. When his body thins, he lets the blow pass through. It seems simple, but it's real-time engineering. But here's a detail almost no one mentions. Everything in Reed still obeys the consistency of the elastic material he becomes. There's a cost, a balance, an operational ceiling he needs to calculate. Now look at Plastic Man. Eel isn't stretching in the classical sense. He's rewriting the way he exists at every second. It's creative chaos. Car, glider, safe, dragon. Whatever his mind asks, he delivers. And it's not a collection of tricks. It's his bodily state. That's why linear comparisons fail. You measure Reed's reach in miles? Eel answers by switching the genre of reality. Reed increases leverage to multiply force. Eel becomes catapult, ammunition, and battlefield at the same time. The right question isn't who stretches farther, but who maintains control of the narrative field of combat. And that's where the rupture begins. Reed wins positional battles. He surrounds, restricts, anticipates the adversary's vector, and turns the terrain into an equation. When necessary, he becomes a wall or a kinetic whip, folds his own body to restrain without killing, absorbs impact, and releases energy like a spring. That's why he has already contained entire heavy-hitting teams. His power is applied geometry. But, and this is the point that changes everything, Reed's geometry still stems from material consistent with our world. He stretches, but he doesn't become conceptually something else. Most people stop here and think comparing them is fair. I'll show you why it's not. Eel plays with the grammar of the scene. He doesn't just occupy space, he redefines what fits in space. No form ceiling, no lingering pain, no visible wear. When someone tries to reduce Eel to the same power, just more exaggerated, they miss the nuance. Plastic Man operates as an exception to the rules, almost a conscious glitch. This isn't empty hyperbole, it's the axis that separates the two. Reed works with optimization and limits. Eel works with exceptions and total license. And when exception meets optimization, optimization needs a breach. Does one exist? Yes. But no one talks about it because it seems counterintuitive. I'll get there. So why open the video saying they don't even compare? Because their very combat experience demands different lenses. Reed creates advantage through instant planning and pattern reading. Eel collapses patterns. Reed benefits from a predictable opponent, even if powerful. Eel turns unpredictability into a primary weapon. What seems unfair is, in truth, the whole point. They operate in distinct domains. Most people go wrong here because they reduce it to a contest of who stretches farther. It's not about distance, it's about authority over form. And when form is everything, the entire field becomes a tool. Keep that key in mind because it unlocks the rest of the video. If one of them has to respect the logic of the material he chose to become, and the other can be any material with no apparent cost, who dictates the rhythm? Seems obvious. But there's a historical exception involving Reed's molecular control that, if pushed to the limit, balances the scale for an instant. I'll show you that window today. It's brief, but it exists. Now, to understand why that window is so rare, we need to go back to the origins. The cold science that educated Reed's body, and the chaotic accident that freed Eel from physics. If there's one point that separates Reed Richards from Eel O'Brien, since the very birth of their powers, it lies in their origins. Reed is the product of scientific obsession, a man who believed so deeply in technological progress that he risked his own life and that of his team to push the limits of space exploration. The experimental flight that exposed him to cosmic radiation wasn't a blind accident. It was the direct consequence of his intellectual ambition. The mutation that turned him into Mr. Fantastic was the result of a miscalculated formula, but still, it was born of science. That defines Reed's philosophy. Every time he stretches his body, his mind is processing invisible equations, turning elasticity into military strategy and tactical solution. He doesn't improvise powers, he applies knowledge in real time. On the other side, Eel O'Brien wasn't a scientist, or a hero, or an example of discipline. He was a thief. An unlucky criminal who found himself in the middle of a shootout, wounded by bullets and soaked in a mix of experimental chemicals. No preparation, no intention to explore the cosmos or challenge physics. It was pure contingency, a mutation born of chaos. And the result is that his powers reflect this. Plastic Man doesn't respect proportions, doesn't respect logic, doesn't respect what we understand as material limits. If Reed thinks like an engineer, Eel acts like a conscious cartoon. This philosophical difference already decides much before the physical fight even begins. There's a curious detail that is rarely mentioned. Reed remains human at his core. He carries family, responsibilities, a legacy of leadership. His choices always stem from a balance between genius and ethics. Eel, on the other hand, is a character who was reborn from failure, an anti-hero who embraced the ridiculous and turned it into strength. That gives him a narrative freedom Reed will never have. While Richard seeks order, O'Brien grows stronger in chaos. What may seem like just a personality contrast is, in practice, the foundation of the difference between the two powers. Mr. Fantastic creates based on precision, limiting himself to what he can control. Plastic Man exists as pure flexibility, without grounding in science, without borders for imagination. And it's precisely this chaotic origin that becomes his main weapon, as we'll see next. Because before we understand why Plastic Man can challenge even gods, we need to see how far Reed's science has taken his body and his mind. Many still reduce Reed Richards to the stereotype of the stretchy guy, almost a caricature of a secondary power. But when we look at his greatest feats, it becomes clear that this is far too shallow a reading. Reed can alter not only his shape, but also the density and the force applied in every movement. That has already placed him on the same level as some of Marvel's heaviest hitters. For example, he once managed to restrain Thor, Hulk, Hercules, and Iron Man simultaneously, all imprisoned within his expanded body. That scene is revealing because it shows this isn't just about elasticity. It's total molecular mastery, used tactically to neutralize gods and titans. His durability is also often underestimated. Reed's body has proven to be practically impenetrable. Bullets ricochet without causing damage. Not even Wolverine's adamantium claws managed to pierce him. In battles against cosmic entities, he has withstood attacks that could destroy entire worlds. There are records of Reed enduring stellar energy and even blows from Galactus. This puts into perspective just how far his physiology goes beyond the idea of a rubber man. Reed is, in essence, an elastic field of energy that cannot be broken by conventional means. But the most dangerous aspect of Mr. Fantastic isn't just brute strength or resilience. It's the creativity with which he applies this power. Richards has already turned his own limbs into weapons, shields, tools, and even barriers to protect entire cities. He can generate multiple arms, create containment forms, or even shape his body into complex structures that function as living traps. This versatility is amplified by his scientific mind. Reed doesn't improvise like someone experimenting for the first time. He calculates, anticipates, optimizes. What few realize is that he also pushes beyond the boundaries of ordinary space. In more recent stories, Reed learned to stretch not only his body, but his very existence into alternate dimensions. There was a moment when he literally dragged enemies into the fourth dimension, a place where human perception doesn't function, and the body becomes disoriented. It's an almost Lovecraftian power, because it turns the act of fighting Reed into an experience impossible to rationally comprehend. All of this reinforces that Reed Richards cannot be treated merely as the brain of the Fantastic Four, or the elastic scientist. He is a rare combination of intelligence and physical power, someone who can face monsters like Godzilla or cosmic beings and remain standing. But as impressive as these feats may be, there's a barrier Reed cannot cross. Because in the end, he still plays within the rules of physics, even if he stretches them to the limit. And it's exactly there that Plastic Man turns the game into something completely different. If Reed Richards impresses by bending the laws of physics, Eel O'Brien terrifies precisely because he doesn't respect them at all. Plastic Man doesn't operate with scientific logic. He exists in a fluid, almost cartoon-like state that defies any attempt at explanation. While Reed calculates every move like an engineer, Eel plays with reality as if it were limitless modeling clay. That's why his elasticity isn't just an exaggerated version of Richards' power. It's an entirely different category. Plastic Man has already faced the heaviest hitters of the DC pantheon. He has grown to proportions equivalent to entire buildings, endured attacks from dark versions of Darkseid, and even fought Furnace, a furious Martian manhunter capable of destroying the Justice League on his own. More than strength, what shocks is the absence of fragility. He has been frozen, shattered into 1,000 fragments, abandoned at the bottom of the ocean for centuries, and yet he still reassembled himself as if nothing had happened. The word immortal may sound hyperbolic, but in his case, it literally describes his condition. Eel also stands out for the absurd creativity of his transformations. He doesn't just stretch or expand, he has turned into cars, airplanes, animals, heroes, villains, and even multiple objects simultaneously. In comics, Plastic Man has already transformed into a missile, a dragon, and even iconic pop culture characters, always with total control. This borderless malleability generates a psychological impact in combat. The enemy cannot predict what they're going to face because Plastic Man doesn't obey the logical instinct of a fight. He can turn the entire battlefield itself into a weapon. Another factor rarely discussed is how even characters like Batman recognize the threat. The Dark Knight, known precisely for always having a plan, has admitted that there is no reliable strategy to definitively defeat Plastic Man. At best, he can only be contained for a short period. That acknowledgement carries weight, because if even DC's most prepared mind admits powerlessness, it means we're talking about a power that surpasses any limit of predictability. It's at this point that the difference with Reed Richards becomes most evident. While Mr. Fantastic manipulates every molecule with mathematical precision, Plastic Man plays with his very matter like an artist of chaos. Reed may restrain entire teams of Avengers, but Eel can distort physical reality until the enemy completely loses their sense of combat. It's like comparing the logic of war strategy with the logic of a cartoon. Both can win battles, but only one keeps fighting when all the rules stop making sense. And that's exactly what makes the comparison so uneven. Reed Richards has a ceiling, even if an extremely high one. Plastic Man doesn't. And that absence of a limit is what begins to tip the scales when we think about a direct confrontation. But before reaching a conclusion, it's necessary to place the two side by side, on the same field, to see how this difference manifests in practice. Putting Reed Richards and Eel O'Brien face to face isn't just about measuring elasticity, it's putting philosophy against chaos. Reed represents the scientist who manipulates every molecule in a calculated way, using logic to turn his body into a weapon or a tool. Plastic Man, on the other hand, is pure improvisation, a body without laws that responds only to his own imagination. This difference changes how each of them fights. While Reed seeks to restrain and neutralize, Eel deconstructs the very concept of limits and creates unpredictable scenarios. A good parallel is the comparison between Flash and Quicksilver. Both run at superhuman speed, but one of them breaks through the barrier of time itself, while the other still plays within measurable parameters. The same applies here. Reed is powerful because he extracts the maximum possible from the rules of physics. Plastic Man is destabilizing because he simply doesn't follow any rules at all. That asymmetry is what makes the contest unfair from the very beginning. Even the greatest strategists of the DC Universe have acknowledged this. In JLA, Ravagger 65, Batman states that Plastic Man may be the only one capable of definitively defeating a being like Martian Manhunter. That kind of statement carries weight because it comes precisely from someone who always has a plan. Reed Richards, even with his genius, still depends on material limits for his power to work. He cannot completely ignore the logic of mass or the conservation of energy. This doesn't diminish Richards' impact, who has already defeated enemies like Onslaught and withstood attacks that would have disintegrated any other hero. But when it comes to ultimate reach, Plastic Man will always have the advantage. And the most revealing detail lies in each one's narrative style. Reed wins as a leader, strategist, and scientist. Plastic Man wins because he can become everything Reed cannot predict. This is the comparison that exposes the essence of their clash. It's not about who is smarter or who has more combat experience. It's about who is limited by an invisible ceiling and who knows no barriers. And when we're talking about characters who can face gods, that minimal difference is exactly what decides the fight. But there's still one last piece. Because there's a provocation that the fandom itself never abandons. What if Reed had prep time? In a direct confrontation, without preparation, Plastic Man wins. The difference isn't about millimeters of reach. It's about the very nature of power. Reed Richards manipulates every molecule with precision, can restrain entire lineups of heavy hitters, withstand stellar-level energy, and has even taken his tricks beyond ordinary space, stretching his existence into the fourth dimension to disorient opponents. Even so, everything Reed does operates with cost, with a ceiling, with engineering. Plastic Man, on the other hand, has no measurable ceiling. Strength to face Justice League-level entities, malleability that ignores material coherence, and a durability that flirts with immortality. He can literally be reduced to fragments and return whole centuries later. When the rule of the game is who dictates the form of combat, Eel O'Brien dictates, and he doesn't give it back. And the classic fandom argument comes up, what if Reed has prep time? It's fair to put that on the table, because we're talking about the same man who has conceived weapons capable of wounding celestial-level entities and who lives designing impossible solutions. There is a theoretical window, yes, to turn the fight into a dimensional puzzle, exploiting Reed's molecular control to push the opponent into a context where even Plastic Man loses reference. But that window is short and depends on variables that Eel himself usually dismantles with unpredictability. Even minds like Batman's admit that defeating Plastic Man definitively borders on impractical. At best, he can be delayed. When even DC's Ultimate Planner speaks of temporary containment, that says a lot about the asymmetry. So the verdict is straightforward. Plastic Man takes the crown in this cut of powers, while Reed remains narratively a central piece of the Marvel Universe. A leader, a strategic mind, and yes, one of the most underestimated heroes when it comes to raw physical potential. The real question is another. In a canonical encounter with real preparation and context, what kind of countermeasure would Reed dare to design against a body that knows no limits? If there's an answer, it would come through a dimensional breach, not brute force. If this kind of analysis gives you an edge in conversations and makes you see what trailers and comics hide, subscribe now. We're one step away from hitting an important milestone for the channel, and your subscription puts you in the front row for the next investigations, visual guides, comic versus adaptation comparisons, and theories with real foundations. Your support is what keeps this line of content alive and growing. Before we wrap up, drop in the comments. From which city and country are you watching this video? I read them all. And if this deep dive connected you with the truths of this clash, hit that like button to signal that you want more impossible duels explained with evidence.